Well, we're talking about a choice that every one of us need to make. How are we going to handle our money? Are we going to handle it my way, following my wants and my needs and my desires and my ideas? Me using it to build my own little kingdom here on this earth? Or are we going to use God's money God's way and follow His principles and His ideas and do it for His glory and honor and to build His kingdom? That's a choice that really all of us need to make. How are we going to handle our money? And I believe that the choice we make leads to some anticipated consequences. Fact of the matter is that when we use God's money God's way, it always brings God's blessing into our lives. But when we decide that we're going to use our money our way, often that leads to trouble. And I'm talking about the trouble of consumer debt. You know, the Bible talks very plainly about the problem of consumer debt. In fact, consumer debt is, if we want to define it, is simply what you owe. It can be those things we call revolving debt, which is, credit card things that you need to pay off every month, and non-revolving debt, which are things like that you pay out over time, like car loans and student loans and so forth. One caveat that I discovered this week, which was a good thing, most financial gurus do not consider a home mortgage to be consumer debt. It's more of an investment that you make, because you're going to get back the dollars that you put in. You're going to get those back with appreciation. But one of the things that we need to realize is that when you look at consumer debt, we're really dealing with one of the three greatest fears of people in our society. And part of that is this fear that I'm not going to have enough money on which to live. That's one of the number one fears in our society. And so that fear leads people to rely on credit. And credit leads to debt. And debt is a harsh taskmaster. Listen to what the book of Proverbs says. We're looking in this whole series at the book of Proverbs and what it has to say about God's principles and thoughts about money management. So in Proverbs 22 and verse 7, we read this. He says, just as the rich rule the poor, so the borrower is servant to the lender. Now, that word servant there could be translated slave. When you're in debt, you're a slave to your lender. Do you realize that Americans are enslaved to debt at the tune of about $90,000 in consumer debt each per individual? $90,000 in consumer debt. That's the average here in America. And yet everywhere you look, there are advertisements for easy credit, for easy debt that you can get into. What's in your wallet? Or sign up for this card and you get 70,000 free miles on an airline. Or this has a low introductory fee, or 5% cash back, or consolidate your loans and lower your payments. And on it goes. Buy this car, travel now, pay later, 90 days, same as cash, and so forth. No payment for the first year. I saw that just recently this week. What none of these advertisements and come-ons mention is that four-letter word, debt. Now, that sounds like an innocent enough word, debt, But I want to share with you, I've shared this before in our church, but I love doing this, okay? Here's the synonyms for the word debt from Roget's Thesaurus. Are you ready for this? Owe, obligated, liable, in deficit, in default, insolvent, encumbered, in over one's head, tied up, out of pocket, in arrears, indigent, pauper, destitute, penniless, needy, lacking, distressed, in difficulty, a deadbeat, having a wolf at the door, living hand to mouth, beggarly, empty, having seen better days, gone to the dogs, racked and ruined, impoverished, bad off, hard up, beaten down, reduced to ruin, fleeced and stripped, bereft, bereaved, reduced, unable to make ends meet, embarrassed, broke, and busted. Whew. I mean, that sounds like some kind of disease that I don't want to get, right? When you think about it. Remember what Solomon said. He told us that to be in debt is to be in slavery. And I wish that it was easy as just wearing a mask or getting vaccinated so we wouldn't fall into this debt trap to avoid debt. But it isn't easy, and folks, it wreaks havoc on your life, on your family, on your marriage. So let me ask the question, how do you know when you're headed into debt, when you're really getting into trouble in indebtedness? How do you know when you're getting head over heels in trouble? I want to give you 5 danger signs for you to evaluate where you stand in your personal finances right now. 5 danger signs that help you to realize that I'm really in trouble here. Danger sign number 1 is simply this, that you begin living on credit instead of paying cash. You begin living on credit instead of paying cash. I mean, if you begin to depend on credit to maintain your lifestyle, then the fact of the matter is you're spending too much. Now, how do I know that I'm living on credit? Really easily. The balance in your credit card statement gets bigger each month and each month and each month. That says to me that you're putting too much emphasis on credit and you're not paying enough cash. And you know that you're using your credit card to maintain your lifestyle that you can't maintain through your salary. So you just keep putting it on credit. So you've begun to live on credit. There's 2 big problems with living on credit, folks. Number 1, it shows a lack of contentment on our part. Because what you're saying is, I have got to have it, and I've got to have it now. Over in Proverbs chapter 30 and verse 8, is recorded a very appropriate prayer, I think. It simply says this, the writer of Proverbs there says, and he's praying to God, he says, give me neither poverty nor riches. Give me just enough to satisfy my needs. And then he goes on and he says that if you give me poverty, then chances are I may steal to put food on the table, and I would dishonor you, God. But if you give me riches, then I may choose to ignore you and dishonor you. So just give me what I need, enough to satisfy my needs. Paul, writing to Timothy in 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 6 through 8, wrote this. He says, yet true godliness with contentment is in itself wealth, great wealth. After all, we brought nothing with us when we came into this world, and we can't take anything with us when we leave it. So if we have enough food and clothing, let us be content. So living on credit really shows that we're not content with what God has placed into our hands. We feel that we must have more. And to get that more, we'll go into debt so that we'll have more. But even more importantly, credit card debt is presuming, folks, on the future. It's presuming that we know what lies ahead, that you're saying to yourself, you know, I can pay it off later. I'll still have my job. I'll still have my health. Nothing's going to happen to my family that will impact this. So I'm going to borrow money now. I'm going to put it on credit, and I'm going to presume on the future that everything's going to be fine. But you don't know that, do you? Listen to what Solomon said. He tells us not to presume on the future. In 21 and verse 1, he says, don't brag about tomorrow, since you don't know what the day will bring. Folks, you could easily go out right now and make a huge investment, bring a huge indebtedness, and tomorrow you get laid off from work. That's the problem with debt. Not only that, but the major issue of indebtedness is one of the biggest problems that marriages face, that couples face. I talk oftentimes when I'm counseling that there are what I call the 5 landmines of marriage, 5 difficulties that couples encounter that can ruin a marriage. Things like in-laws, things like raising children, things like communication, things like sexual intimacy issues, and debt. And in fact, the 2 biggest of those landmines are communication and indebtedness, and often those go hand in glove because you're not talking with one another about what's going on with your finances. Listen to Proverbs 28, verse 25. It says, greed causes fightings. Now, I'm not going to embarrass anybody by asking you to raise your hand, but have you ever fought with your spouse over money? Or with your child over money, or with your parent over money? Greed causes fightings, but trusting the Lord leads to prosperity. So danger number 1 is you start living on credit, okay? Danger sign number 2 is then you begin delaying payments, or you're just paying the minimum due. I mean, if you're missing payments, if you're making late payments, if you're just paying the minimum on your credit cards, if you find yourself constantly under tension over money worries, if you find that you've got a lot of checks that are bouncing because of insufficient funds, if you're having to dip into your reserves to pay bills, or you don't have any reserves at all, that's a red flag. That means you have stepped on the landmine of debt. In Proverbs 3:27 and 28 is this statement: don't withhold payment of your debts. Don't say some other time if you can pay now. Now, some of you are, can find yourself telling bill collectors some other time because you can't pay now. You've gotten yourself so far in debt that you can't keep up with your indebtedness. Listen to what Paul said. He said, let no debt remain outstanding. What Paul is saying, what God's word is saying, what I'm saying to you as a Christian brother is simply this. Folks, as followers of Jesus Christ, we need to pay our debts. I mean, after all, we represent Jesus Christ to this broken world. And we serve the King of Kings, and people are looking to us. We need to pay our debts. We need not delay things or put creditors off or anything like that. So that's a second danger sign. You're late pay and making payments. You're just paying the minimum there. A third danger sign is that you're unable to save or to tithe. You can't save for the future because you got all these bills to pay. Or maybe you decide, you know what, I really ought to start giving more to the church than just the $1 or $2 tip that I give occasionally when I show up on Sunday morning at church. I really ought to try giving, more like this 10% thing that God says in His Word. But you can't do that because you're so far in debt. You've got too many bills, you got too many hands in your pocket. And you can't do that. Folks, if I'm not saving, if I'm not tithing, then I'm spending too much. Again, Proverbs 21 verse 20 says, the wise man saves for the future, but the foolish man spends whatever he gets. Am I talking to anybody here? You know what it means? The foolish man spends whatever he gets. You got this check, and 3 or 4 days later, where'd it go? The wise man saves the future, but the foolish man spends whatever he gets. There's a fourth danger sign, and that is extravagant spending. You just begin to overspend. I mean, folks, think about it. There are all sorts of things out there to spend money on, right? There's all sorts of things we'd love to have. We want this gadget and that experience and so forth. And so it's very easy to begin spending extravagantly. One of the good things, if there is a good thing, about spending extravagantly is it's easy to spot. And you begin to see, oh, wait a minute, I am spending and I've got stuff that I really didn't need to buy. And suddenly I realize what's gotten into me. Look at all I'm doing with my money. So I'm beginning to buy things I don't need just because I had money. When you begin to do that, folks, it's not very long till you find yourself in the debt trap. I mean, you'll step square in that landmine of debt. Proverbs 21 verse 17 says, those who love pleasure, and that would mean extravagant things. Those who love pleasure become poor. Those who love wine and luxury will never be rich. You see how when you overspend, you're never going to get where you really thought you were going to get. Proverbs 25 verse 28, a person without self-control is like a city with broken down walls. And that's what we mean by spending extravagantly. There's no self-control there. Another way in which we overspend, and maybe you hadn't even thought of this, and I just want to share this with you from God's Word. This is an area of danger that we need to be aware of, and that is co-signing a loan for somebody else. Maybe it's a family member, maybe it's a relative, maybe it's a close friend or whatever. You want to help them out. But boy, there's too many times and that will come back to bite you. Look at what the book of Proverbs says. Proverbs 17 verse 18, he says, it is poor judgment to guarantee another person's debt or to put up security for a friend. It's poor judgment. And here's the key thing. Proverbs doesn't just say that once. He says it 3 different times. Don't put up security. Don't guarantee the debts of somebody else. I won't mention the second one, but here's the third one. It's in Proverbs 11, verse 15 and 16. He says, there's a danger in putting up security for a stranger's debt. It's safer not to guarantee another person's debt. I mean, even if you don't have to shell out money to help that person with their indebtedness, just signing your name on a signature document as a co-signer impacts your credit report. It goes against, if they're late on a payment, guess where it shows up? It shows up on your credit report. When they can't find that person, who do they call? They call you. You're the co-signer, and you're responsible for that. So Solomon is telling us here, avoid taking on indebtedness from another. And also avoid the greed of overindulgence. Because some people think, extravagant spending is going to make them feel wealthy. But folks, it's just an illusion. It will never, ever make you wealthy. It's heading toward the debt trap. And then the 5th danger sign is that of always looking for get-rich-quick schemes. You're always looking for a way to get out of debt quickly, And boy, if you're not in debt, this one will get you in debt, okay? And if you're in debt, this is the one that will get you ripped off just really, really quickly. Proverbs 21 verse 5 says, good planning and hard work lead to prosperity, but hasty shortcuts lead to poverty. Proverbs 11:18, evil people get rich for the moment, but the reward of the godly will last. And then Proverbs 24 and verse 30, the writer of Proverbs says this, I walk by the field of a lazy person, the vineyard of one with no common sense. I saw that it was overgrown with nettles, and it was covered with weeds, and its walls were broken down. Then as I looked and I thought about it, I learned this lesson. A little extra sleep, a little more slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. Then poverty will pounce on you like a bandit. Scarcity will attack you like an armed robber. You see, when you get into debt, it becomes so easy to then slip into fantasy. And you think that there's going to be some magical way in which something's going to happen and you're going to get out of debt. And what it does, it begins to produce laziness. I don't need to necessarily work for this because somehow my ship's going to come in and I'm going to get out of debt. And so you're going to the mailbox every day and you're just expecting some unexpected check to jump out of the mailbox that's going to bail you out of all your situation. The truth is, it's going to take you longer to get out of debt than it did to get in debt. That's just a law of finance. But we get this idea that, I've got to come up with some plan to get out of debt quickly. And then we begin to fantasize about tomorrow, and we get all these get-rich-quick schemes. I'm going to jump into this multi-level marketing kind of thing. I just got to get 5 friends who have 5 friends who each have 5 friends, and they're going to have 5 friends, and I'm going to be the top dog on this pyramid, and look at all the money I'm going to make. That kind of thinking leads to disaster. That's what the writer of Proverbs is saying. There's just a lot of people out there who are waiting for the next big deal to come along. You're thinking, someday this big deal is going to come through and everything's going to be taken care of. But the truth is, it's that get-rich-quick mentality that keeps you in debt. Proverbs 28, verse 19 says, a hard worker has plenty of food, but a person who chases fantasies ends in poverty. That's what I'm talking about here, fantasizing that somehow I'm going to get out of this. Chapter 28, verse 22. Greedy people try to get rich quick, but don't realize they're headed for poverty. So if it's not some kind of marketing scheme or some kind of deal like that, then there are people out there who've got the idea, I'm going to get out of debt by playing the lottery. I'm going to go down to the casino and I'm going to, use part of my paycheck. And every time I get a paycheck, I'm going to go down and spend part of it so that I can hit it big so I can get out of debt, Or somebody else is going to say, well, I'm just going to, every week going to buy a lottery ticket or whatever. Or say, hey, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go out and buy a bunch of magazines so that I'll have a great chance to win the Publishers Clearinghouse sweepstakes. And that's how I'm going to get out of debt. In your heart of hearts, you wouldn't tell anybody this, but deep down inside, you've got this idea that that's how I'm going to get out of debt. I'm going to gamble for it. I'm going to use the lottery or whatever. Folks, there is a name for people who that's their approach to getting out of debt. And you know what that name is? Loser. They're losers, okay? You lose when you play the lottery. You lose when you're counting on gambling to get you out of debts. You're a loser when you think Terry Bradshaw is going to show up with some balloons and an oversized Publishers Clearinghouse check, and suddenly all your worries are going to be gone. You know what? You have a better chance of being hit by a meteorite when you leave this building today than you have of winning the lottery. Statistically, that's true, okay? So you can't pin all your hopes on that. Ecclesiastes 5:7 says, dreaming all the time instead of working is foolishness. Now, if these 5 warning signs are kind of a description of your situation, then you have stepped on that landmine of debt. And you're in trouble, okay? Now, you might ask yourself, how did I get here? How did I get to this situation? There are 3 words that describe how you got there. Number 1 is ignorance. It just begins with a lack of understanding finance and the danger of debt. It begins with not keeping good records of your financial situation. Unfortunately, there are some people who are listening to me here today, either online or here in this building, who have no idea how far in debt you are. If I were to ask you, what is your net worth, you would look at me like a calf looking at a new gate. You wouldn't have a clue what I'm talking about here, okay? And you're ignorant of how you're going to get out of debt. So ignorance is one of those words. The second one is the word indulgence. And that's probably the biggest problem that those in debt face. It's that impulse to buy, to acquire, to have everything that everybody else has. And I've got to have it too. And so our society makes it so easy to do that. We've got everything from 3 easy payments to 60 months to pay to no money down, no money, no payment until 2024 or whatever. And as a result, Americans are thousands and tens of thousands of dollars in debt. It's going to take them an entire lifetime to retire that debt. So there's indulgence. And then the third word is the word indecision. That's just poor planning. You're just not planning right. Now, I'm not going to embarrass you this morning by asking you to raise your hand, but the question is, do you have a spending plan? Does your family have a spending plan? Commonly known as a budget. Do you have a budget? Do you realize that most Americans have never created a budget? They just live on the paycheck, and here's a bill. Well, maybe I can pay it. I'll throw it up on the cabinet, and we'll get it next week or whatever. They have no budget. They have no idea how much money they have, or where the money goes, or anything like that. So they're overspending, and then when the bills come due, they don't have any money, and so they push them off till the next month, and the whole pattern repeats itself. And certainly, there's no cash reserve if the car breaks down or the baby gets sick, and then they don't know what are they going to do. Some of you are right there right now, aren't you? And you're in financial bondage, and maybe you know it. I mean, there isn't a day that goes by that you aren't racking your mind trying to figure out how we're going to make this work. Which bill do I need to juggle? How am I going to, and just day by day, you're scheming and figuring and trying to juggle bills and saying, well, we'll do this next week, and then we'll do, and on it goes. You're constantly in turmoil. Now, what I want you to know is there is hope for you. I mean, if there wasn't any hope, we wouldn't be talking about this at all. But God has a way, has a plan to give you hope in your financial situation. He has some practical advice. He's got some steps that if we were to follow these, that will lead us away from that debt landmine. So what does God want you to do to begin to get out of the debt trap? I'm going to give you 8 very specific steps that I would challenge you to begin taking that will help you to find financial freedom in your life. And we're going to go over these real quickly. If you need to call me or sit down with me and let me clarify some of these steps, I'm glad to do that. I can help you do that. We're just going to run through these real quickly. Number 1, you need to make a commitment to becoming debt-free right now. You need to make that commitment. You know, it starts with a commitment. And I know what some of you are thinking. You say, well, we are so far in debt that maybe the best thing for us is just to file bankruptcy and just start afresh. You know, that seems to be the easiest thing to do. Well, what I want you to know is the Bible says it is wicked not to repay. The psalmist said this in Psalm 37, verse 21, the wicked borrow and do not repay. Folks, God wants you to get out of debt His way for a couple of reasons. One is that God cares about the people that you owe money to. And for you to declare bankruptcy is defrauding them of what is rightfully theirs to have. And the second part of that is when you do the right thing, it really helps you to grow. But it all starts with a commitment. You have to commit to becoming debt-free right now. And it's not going to be easy. It is so much easier to get into debt than to get out of debt. But it's going to take commitment. It's going to take discipline. It's going to take delayed gratification. It's going to take perseverance. But more than any of that, it's going to take character. It's going to take character to get out of debt, because any fool can get in debt. But it's going to take great character to get out of debt. And so it begins with a commitment to this decision that I'm going to get out of debt. So it starts there. Second, you need to pay God first and yourself first. Pay God first and yourself first. And what we're talking about here is the principle of tithing and the principle of saving. Now, you ask the question, why do I need a tithe? We said last week that God owns it all. He owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. So why do I need a tithe? Listen to this, Deuteronomy 14, verse 23. This is from the Living Bible paraphrase. It says, the purpose of tithing is to teach you always to put God first in your lives. It's to teach us to put God first in our lives. So right off the top, you pay God the first 10%, and you pay yourself the second 10% in the way of savings. Years ago, you know, I would fill out a budget, and I would list all the things that we needed to pay. And I noticed after a while of doing that I always ran out of money before I got to the bottom of the list. And you know what was at the bottom of the list? Savings and tithing. I always ran out of money. I made the decision to put those two things at the top of the list. The first thing is the tithe. The second thing is the savings account. You know what I found? When I got to the end of my list, I had all the bills paid. I can't explain that, but that's the principle here. You pay God first, you pay yourself first in the way of savings, and then you live off the other 80%. That plan will work, and it will help you to get out of the debt trap. Now, it may cause you to have to do a major financial reorganization in your life, but folks, it's worth it. Pay God first, pay yourself first. And folks, when you begin to give to God, you're going to find that God is going to be faithful to you. We sang about God is good. We talked about God's faithfulness continually to us. When you do things God's way, God is going to be faithful to you. He's going to take care of your needs. Now, He has not promised to take care of your greeds, okay? But He will take care of your needs. He's promised to meet all your needs. Now, I know what some of you are saying. Sam, man, I'd like to do that, but I just can't afford to tithe to the Lord. Could I just be honest with you and tell you that you cannot afford not to tithe? Because if you want God in the middle of your mess, you need to do it God's way. And when you start giving to God what is rightfully His, God is going to take care of the other things in your life. You want God's blessing on your life, on your finances? Then one of the best ways to do that is to start giving the tithe and start saving money for rainy days. So you pay God first, you pay yourself second, and then you start paying off the other indebtedness a little bit at a time. The third thing you need to do is you need to list all that you own and all that you owe. Now, hopefully, some of you did this because we gave you this as an assignment last week when we said, write down everything you own and everything you owe and what's your take-home pay and where does all that money going, okay? Proverbs 24, verse 3, a house is built by wisdom and becomes stronger through good sense. So you need to put down all the information, have the information there. Just an honest appraisal of where I am financially. Again, 18:13 says, what a shame, yes, how stupid to decide before knowing the facts. In other words, if we need to know the facts, we're going to make wise financial decisions. Fourth, and maybe this one's going to surprise you, have a sale. Have a sale. If you're stuck in debt, you've got some things that you probably need to get rid of at your house. I mean, there are some things that are weighing you down that maybe you don't need. You've just got too much stuff. And some of you are thinking, but some of that is paid off. Well, you've got equity in it. And it might very well be that you need that equity to help you get out of debt. And if you sell it, that you'll be further down the road on paying off some of the things you need to pay off. And then think also about the overhead of even those things that you've got paid off. You got an RV sitting in the street. How much are you paying a year on insurance for something that you use once or twice a year? You got a boat in the backyard. How many times have you replaced the propeller on that because you hit something under the water, submerged? And over again, all the money that you're outlaying on things, have a sale. Use that as equity to get out of your debt. Fifth thing then is set up a repayment plan. You're not going to wake up one morning and suddenly discover, hey, I'm out of debt. You don't get out of debt unintentionally. You've got to be intentional about it. You've got to have a plan. Proverbs 21:5, good planning and hard work lead to prosperity. Good planning and hard work lead to prosperity. So you've got to have a plan. And to do this right, to make sure that you got a plan that works, it might be that you need a financial counselor. You need to find somebody who can help you get involved and make a commitment to them and help you to work this plan. Because the fact of the matter is, if you could have done the plan on your own, you would have done it now, but you didn't do it. And so that means you need some help probably. I don't know what it is about finances, But it's kind of one of those areas of our life where we will not ask for help. I mean, you got cancer, what do? You go to the doctor and you ask for help. You're in financial danger, indebtedness, and you don't want to ask for help. Well, folks, debt is like a financial cancer. It is eating away at the health of your family. It's destroying your home. And yet when it comes to debt, we so often don't want to talk to anybody about it. We don't even want to talk within the home about it because we're afraid, of all the ramification there. It's one of those miscommunication problems that become landmines in so many marriages. So find somebody that maybe can help you to pull off a plan and stick with that plan. And number 6, this ought to be a no-brainer, but a lot of people don't realize this. If you're trying to get out of debt, you don't add any new debt, okay? Because that's a revolving door. I mean, there's a lot of reasons people go into debt, but the main reason is they just keep spending over and over and over again. We spend more than we make, So we have to make this decision. I'm going to stop it now. We're not buying another thing because you're never going to get out of debt if you keep adding more to your credit cards and so forth. That's where you got in trouble in the first place. And then the 7th thing, you need to share your plan with your creditors. Creditors hate it when you stop talking to them, when you try to hide from them, when you won't answer their calls, or when you find out it's them, you say, well, he's not here, or whatever. You need to talk to them. You don't just stop opening their letters or pretending they're not there. You tell them what you're going to do. You just say, be up front and say, you know what, I don't want to file bankruptcy on you, but I can't make this $100 a month payment. But I can pay you $25 a month. I can pay you $10 a month. Tell them what you can do and ask them to help you. Many times they will. They'll help you. And you might say, no, they'll never do that. My creditor will never help me out. Well, listen to what God says that he will do for you if you'll follow his plan. Proverbs 16:7. When people's lives please the Lord, you're pleasing the Lord because you're trying to do it his way. When people's lives please the Lord, even their enemies are at peace with them. That's what you need to pray will happen. Share with your creditors what you're going to do and pray that God would make them favorable toward you. And then number 8, and that is stick to it. Stick to it. I mean, getting out of debt is not easy. It takes discipline, it takes effort, it takes sacrifice. But these principles do work. And you just ask God, give you strength to stick this out. You can do this by God's strength and with God's help. But it's not easy. But you can do this. Now here's your assignment for the week, okay? I want you to create your plan. This last week, I hope you wrote down what you own, what you owe, what you make, and where it goes, okay? And now I want you to write out your plan, a plan for getting out of debt. Again, Proverbs 21 verse 5 says, plan carefully and you will have plenty. If you act too quickly, you will never have enough. And so start out just spending some time with God, asking for wisdom and guidance and boldness and peace. And then start building your plan. Get your budget written out. Start giving to God first. Start putting money in savings. Because every good budget has a place for savings. You need that. You need investment for your retirement. In fact, listen to Proverbs 6, verse 6 through 9. He's really talking about planning for the future. He says, take a lesson from the ants, you lazy bone. Learn from their ways and be wise. Though they have no prince or governor or ruler to make them work, they labor hard all summer, gathering food for the winter. So we need to make sure we're ready for the winters when they come. Now, as you begin this plan, there really are 2 vital commitments that you need to make. The first is a commitment to follow God's financial plan. It has to start there. God's plan for me. Keep good records, have a plan, have a budget, avoid credit, give God his 10%, save the next 10%, and then just be content with what you have. But folks, there's a second commitment that's even more important than this one. Following God's plan for your finances is important. But following God's plan for your whole life is even more important than that. And in order to follow God's plan for your life, we have to realize there is a debt that we will never be able to repay. None of us will ever be able to repay that. And that's the debt of the wrongs that we've done, the sin in our life. The things that we have done that have displeased God, that have hurt us, that have hurt others. That's a decision that we've got to make, that we're going to seek help with that debt as well. And that comes by seeking God's forgiveness, asking God to forgive us. See, you and I can't balance out the indebtedness that we have toward God because of the wrong in our life by doing good works. We'll never be able to do enough good works to balance that out. It's impossible. So what do you do about it? Do you hide from it? Do you kind of just ignore it? Well, God has a different answer. In Colossians 2, Paul told us this, that we owed a debt because we broke God's laws. That debt listed all the rules that we had failed to follow. But God forgave us and took away that debt and nailed it to the cross. That's what the cross of Jesus Christ is all about. That's why He died there, to pay the debt that we owed because of the sin in our life. And so you need to just go to God and say, God, I recognize that I'm wrong, that I've done so many things that have put me in debt to you. And the wages of sin, yes, is death, and that's where I'm heading. But I need your forgiveness. You've done something for me in Jesus Christ to deal with that debt, and that is He died to pay the sin for my life, and I need your forgiveness. That's where it all starts. So let me ask you today, will you receive God's forgiveness? How do you get that? By asking Him. By trusting Him to forgive you. You ask Him for it. That's where it begins. Let's bow for a word of prayer. And if you've never said to Jesus Christ, I trust you for the forgiveness that I need. I thank you for paying the debt for my sins. You could do that right now. Just go to Him in your heart and say, Jesus Christ, thank you for paying the debt that I could never repay. Thank you for assuming that debt, wiping it out by your grace. I ask you to forgive me right now. And I ask you to help me to begin to live the kind of life that you want me to live, to go in a new and a different direction. Give me the strength to do that. And then while our heads are bowed, we also need to pray, all of us, to commit our finances to God. I would venture to say that some of you, no doubt, are pretty discouraged about your finances. Maybe this has not been an easy message to hear. But what I want you to know is there is hope. What is impossible with men is possible with God. And maybe this week, for the very first time ever, you sense that we really need to do something about our finances. Maybe get on your knees as a family and just give God your financial mess. But before that, it really even needs to begin in your own individual heart. So would you go to God right now and just say, God, I am willing to do whatever you and godly counsel tells me to do to get out of this debt trap. I need your direction. I need your strength. Show me your plan. Help me to follow this plan that you've shown us in your word by your strength and your power. I ask for this in Jesus' name. Amen.